Hello everyone, it is me, Ben, from Ben by the Books, where we look at the good, the bad, the ugly, and should you even buy this book? I'm back. It's been a while, been very busy due to the 4th of July weekend. It's been very hot over here where I am, and work has been very, very busy. So I'm very excited to be back to be recording another video, or at least our end of the month video. Now, last time I started, or at least I believe I started, reading this monstrosity here, The Witchwood Crown by Tad Williams. We're not going to go over it, but we are going to talk about Tad Williams himself, because I had not heard of this guy until probably about 5-ish years ago, and I'm very, very excited to go back into the way he writes and the way that he builds his world. So we're not going to talk about The Witchwood Crown today, but we are going to talk about some of his other series that I read, mainly the Otherland series, which was my first of the science fiction series I've ever read, and Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, which is actually set in the same world as The Witchwood Crown, except Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn takes place of roughly 30 years before this series. So I'm not going to go over this series, The Last King of Ostenard. I think I might have to do that in a separate video in of itself, because I am reading the first one here, and I just barely started the Empire Grass. This is the second book of this series. Sorry, there's a siren going on in the background. So I will not be going over The Last King of Ostenard, but I will be talking about some of his other series that I read, again, most notably Otherland and the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. But before we get into all that, if you like these videos I'm putting up, I know that I've been trying to be more consistent every month, but if you do like these stuff, or like this stuff, give it a like, share, comment, subscribe. Again, it helps me out and lets me know that you like doing what we're doing. So let's get into Tad Williams. Now, again, roughly 5 years ago, I had never heard of this guy, and I know that my wife was trying to get me into reading some more science fiction stuff. At that time, I had never read anything science fiction, and I was very hesitant to read science fiction stuff. I'm not really a fan of it. I don't like because when I think of science fiction, I think of Star Wars, and that's basically as much as it goes. When I think of science fiction, I think of like space and aliens and all that stuff. And again, at the time, I was not really into it, and it was because of Otherland I started reading other things that are more science fiction, most notably Greg Bear's Darwin's Radio, which is another great science fiction book. And then I also ended up reading Project Hail Mary, and then saw the movie with my wife. But it's because of Otherland I was able to get into some of those things. So we're going to talk about Otherland, which is this very long science fiction-y series. I think we can probably even move back. I can probably show you guys where they are on my shelf. See, they're right here. They're right here on my shelf in the back. Let's see if I can get these. Whoop. So they're this is the first one, The Otherland, the City of Golden Shadow, right here. And then we have the second one here, River Blue Fire, another great one. And then the third volume, Mountain of Black Glass. And then the final volume, which is right over here, Sea of the Silver Light. So again, those are the books for Otherland. And again, Tad Williams writes in a way that is more like a trilogy style, but when he writes in a trilogy, the last one always ends up being divided into like 2 books because it's so big. So the first book starts off City of Golden Shadow. Okay, starts off with, I believe, a soldier who's wounded, and then it jumps to another section of the end of the 21st century. So this is supposed to take place roughly in 2090, maybe 2090, 2095, somewhere around there. And the internet has gone, or the internet has gotten so advanced that everything about going online is like virtual reality. So when you're hopping online, you're hopping into this virtual reality world. And what happens is the first book, The City of Golden Shadow, follows a group of different individuals that have to end up going online, be it for one reason or another. And the main character is this African woman. She's a professor, and her brother goes online. He's like 10 years old, and he gets trapped in the virtual world. And the way that the virtual reality is described is you kind of go into this tank filled with water, and you're closed in on the tank, and then you're in the virtual reality world. So his body is still in this tank, but his conscious is logged in online, so he can't get out. And the first book does a really good job of setting up the online aspect about what Otherland is, which Otherland is a virtual reality universe. A universe that is controlled by the wealthy and the powerful. Basically billionaires invest this money into creating their own universe. And all of the worlds are connected by this the river of blue fire, which is more explained in the second volume, but it's all connected into each other, and all the worlds kind of are linear in a way. And what happens is this professor, she has to find her brother Stephen, and she is joined by other figures that are from different parts of the world, but they're also online. And so they're into the online, and the first book ends with them all being trapped in the virtual reality online, and they start their quest to find the brother. The second volume, The River of Blue Fire, explains more of the inner workings of the world, so how the worlds are all connected, how each billionaire designed each world to suit their own needs, how each world is different, but also very, very similar setup in some of the other worlds. So for example, one of the worlds they go to is like an upside down version of Egypt, where all the pyramids are upside down. There's talking creatures, there's human slaves. Everything is kind of like upside down in that world. There's a world that's completely underwater, and you're in like massive bubbles. So it kind of reminded me of Star Wars Episode 1 in some aspects. There's another world where it's just a massive kitchen, but inside the kitchen there's all these other inanimate objects that are basically shaped into like pirate ships. So there's that world. There's another world that's just a house, but the rooms are like endless, so there's no like end in sight for the house. There's another world that's just a massive sweater, and everything is just kind of like woven worlds. There's another world that's just a maze, kind of like the house, but a little bit different. So each world is different. And so this journey is about these characters who are all from different parts of the world, but they're all together online. And I just love how Tad kind of weaves in a lot of the story arcs, because while the main characters are in the online space, there's also human characters on the outside that are trying to stop these guys from exposing what's really going on. So the reason why, and it gets closer around the third book, you figure out why the billionaires and trillionaires make this Otherland world, and then what their plan is. And their plan is basically to live forever, and they're trying to figure out a way to copy or create a copy of themselves to live on virtually forever, even though their body's dead. So as long as their body is inside of the tank, their consciousness is uploaded online, and they can live forever and do whatever they want. And that's what the purpose is. But then you find out there's a more sinister purpose, which means they go after all these kids and trap them online, which is, when this was written, I think this was written in the late 90s, early zeros, and I don't think anyone would have predicted that unfortunately that stuff still happens today. Like, you have these online chat rooms where kids meet with people and they think that they're kids, and then you find out that they're not really kids and they're just predators. And this is taking on a very similar aspect. It's just on virtual reality, which is something that's completely different, something that even I, as a reader, couldn't really wrap my head around. But it's all resolved towards the end of the series, where obviously good always wins, where good always wins and evil loses, and the entire virtual reality world is shut down through a massive explosion of a server towards the end of the last book. And it was just so, it took me a long time to read this series. The one thing that I have to say is kind of a downside of reading anything that's by Tad Williams is, if you're reading something by Tad Williams, you're going to be in there for a while. Like, you're going to be reading a lot. I started reading the Otherland series in late of 2021, and it wasn't until the end of 2022 when I finished. So I started around October, November 2021 to give a timeline, and then I didn't finish it until around this time, maybe end of August of 2022. So it takes a long time to read his work, but the thing about reading Tad Williams is that his stuff is just amazing, and it's definitely worth the read. It's just they're very long books. If I had the time to reread Otherland again, I totally would. But again, I've already started reading the Witchwood Crown, or the Last King Austin Art series, which again is going to take me some time to read. Now we move on to the other Tad Williams series that I read, which is called Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Now this series is a high fantasy series, so it's completely different than the Otherland series. It's obviously not science fiction. But the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series follows Simon, who is this, he's some sort of like pig keeper or some sort of lowly castle position, who works in this castle, and it's about him going after these magical swords that are called Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and each of these magical swords have the power to defeat evil. And there's a plot, a conspiracy between some human priests and the Storm King, which is this demon, and they bring out these evil elves, or the Scythi as they're called, and these evil elves are following this evil priest by the name of Pirates, who wants to basically work with the Storm King to dominate all of the human world. So it's a pretty cut and dry good and evil story. Again, it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of reading, and I think I have these ones on my shelf as well. I think again, they're right next to the other ones. I know, so far away from all of my shelves. But the first one of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series was called The Dragonbone Chair, which is this one right here. There's other versions of these, but I believe these are the like 80s, late 80s covers. So I know there's, like I said, there's newer ones, but the newer ones just have the swords on them, and I don't think they're really cool. But this is the next one, Stone of Farewell. It's the second one here. And then for this one, since this was so expansive, we have To Green Angel Tower, which is part 1 here. And then again, this one was so expansive, he had to split it up. And this is part 2 right here. So these are a little dusty, unfortunately, which is not ideal, but it is what it is. So again, this series was a high fantasy series, and there's everything that you could expect in a high fantasy series in this particular series. There were creatures, magic, sword battles, siege battles. It was basically like reading Lord of the Rings all over again, but instead of dealing with magic ring, it dealt with magical swords. Now this one I didn't originally have, so I only had the Otherland series, and I decided that I wanted to read other Tad Williams stuff, but I wasn't so sure what to start off with. So I decided to get those ones. And I started reading those in 2022, and I finished them in 2022 because I was so, like, invested in them. I believe in 2022 I read a bunch of, like, shorter novels, and then I read all Tad Williams, then I went back to reading shorter novels. So I read The Dragonbone Chair and was immediately captivated by the world. I read The Stone of Farewell shortly after. Again, I finished all these within the year. So I started these roughly around April of 2022 and finished around June, July of 2022. I read them pretty quick, only because they were the only ones I was reading. So once I get into a reading groove, I don't like to stop reading. I just like to keep going and going and going and going. So I read The Stone of Farewell. I didn't like it as much as The Dragonbone Chair, but again, it's always the downside with the middle chapter of any trilogy. So, like, take Lord of the Rings, for example. The Fellowship of the Ring is probably the best, and then The Return of the King is always the best, because The Return of the King is the end, when all the climax stuff happens. The Two Towers is not really generally great, because it's the middle chapter. It's the same thing here. The Stone of Farewell is not a great chapter, because it's the middle. It's not necessarily the beginning, because the Dragonbone Chair was an amazing beginning, set up all the world. Stone of Farewell is kind of like a continuation of all the setup. And then obviously to Green Angel Tower, part one was pretty strong. Part two was obviously stronger because it's the end and is finally the conclusions all come together. So what did I think of both Otherland and The Memories of Sauron Thorn? So on Goodreads, I rated all 4 of the Otherland books as 5 stars. Again, I generally liked reading Tad Williams. I like his world. I like how he writes. I also like how he puts a synopsis of every book in the beginning of each book. So, for example, take Otherland. Before reading The River Blue Fire, I would read the synopsis of The City of Golden Shadow before and then start reading the book. That way you know, or at least remember what's going on, because there's no real synopsis on the back of some of these books. Mostly because they're a little bit older and they just have the reviews on the back, so it's good to have those there. In terms of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, those are a little more mixed. I believe I gave the first one 5 stars, and the other 3, I think I gave them 4 stars. It's not that they're not bad, but again, I liked the idea of the science fiction series stuff more. I still like his fantasy stuff too, but I just found more of his fantasy stuff kind of taking all of the fantasy elements that we know today and just kind of putting his own version of it, which you can make the argument that's a lot of fantasy stuff. So a lot of fantasy novels derive from J.R.R. Tolkien, from C.S. Lewis, from George R.R. Martin, and then from other fantasy writers, and they all kind of borrow from each other. Like Brandon Sanderson is another one of those. Robert Jordan is another example. So they all kind of borrow from each other. It's not that I don't like the fantasy stuff. There is another fantasy series that Tad Williams has. It's called Shadow March, which I have not read. I would like to read those ones, but again, I'm already reading The Last King of Osenard, and I don't want to overload myself with just Tad Williams. Again, one of the downsides of reading Tad Williams is, as much as I love his stuff, his books are very long, and you have to invest a lot of time into them because they're so long. If you're into epic stories and you're into these long, massive books, then that's definitely these books are definitely something for you to read. If you're into the books that are just shorter and things that, if you want something quick, you might not want to read Tad Williams. Although there was another book that I read by Tad Williams that came out, or at least it was out a while ago. But, excuse me, I read it in 2024. I think I still have it on my shelf. And it's not part of the series, but I believe it's just by itself. I think I can find it on my shelf. Please hold. Where did I put it? I don't know where I put it. But it's called Tail Chaser's Song, which is all about cats. Oh, yes, it's in the back. It's in the back behind my Dean Koontz books. So I didn't read anything that was Tad Williams for a while, and then in 2024 I read this one, Tail Chaser's Song, which is all about cats. It's basically, it's all about cats. There's cat religions, there's cat gods, there's basically everything that you want to know about cats. And I wasn't so keen about reading this one because, again, when you look at what I had read by Tad Williams before, I read the, sorry about this, gotta put it back, because we don't want it to be lost here. So yeah, if you look at what I had read before from Tad Williams, I read a high fantasy series, and I read a science fiction series. So then when I was looking at other books and figuring out, okay, so what else has this guy written? I wasn't so sure if I wanted to read something that was about cats, that was written by Tad Williams. And I read it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was 4 stars. I don't think it was a strong story. I mean, it was good. It was good, don't get me wrong. It was about cats. It was about a cat named Freddy Tail Chaser, and he goes on this quest to find a female cat friend that is run away, and he ends up basically confronting all these other cats that are in these clans, and all these clans are not really, they're kind of fighting, but not really fighting. And then there's this evil cat clan that basically is kind of like demonic, and they just want to kill all the other cats. So when I had started to read this, I was immediately brought back to the memories of reading another set of series by cats that I think most of us would already know, the Aaron Hunter stories by the Warrior Cats. That's what this kind of reminded me of. This was obviously published and written way before Aaron Hunter even decided to do this. So I think this was more of a introduction into what could potentially happen if you decide to take wild animals and put them into clans and make them fight amongst each other. And that's basically what this was. I believe when I read Tail Chaser's Song, I gave it a 4-star rating. I wasn't necessarily happy with it, but I wasn't happy with it, but it also was still kind of good at the same time. I believe it was one of the very first books I read in 2024, which in of itself, 2024 was a massive year for me in books. I believe I read about 40 novels in that year, so I might have to go back possibly and do a massive video of all the books that I read and like ranking them from like the worst to the best. I believe that, like I said, that one was 4 stars. It was generally a good story. I was taken aback by the ending. I thought the ending was kind of weak. All the other stuff, the beginning and the middle, were good, but some of the other stuff I wasn't really a fan of. And I just thought I was reading a pre-Warrior Cat novel that wasn't really Warrior Cat. It was basically more of like Warrior Cats, but it was more in-depth religions, more in-depth politics between the cats and the clans and how they interact with each other. So I wasn't necessarily happy with it, but would I read it again? Probably. Would I read anything by Tad Williams again? Definitely. I just wish that I had more time. Again, my life is very, very busy outside of work and doing other things. So I would love to read Tad Williams again. Same thing how I'd like to read the Shadow March series by Tad Williams. That's another high fantasy series that I would like to read. He also wrote another series about an angel named Bobby Dollar I would like to read and maybe do some videos on. I haven't really decided yet. But this Tad Williams guy, he's definitely a great author. He's an amazing writer. I like his work. It's just his work takes forever. And so there's always this idea of, okay, do I want to read a good story and take forever, or do I want just a mediocre story and have it only take like 2 weeks? Because I feel like as readers, if we're reading and we're like tracking things on Goodreads or Fable or whatever app you use to track your books. I feel like we're always trying to read books to get the bookmarks. We're not really reading books because we want to like invest in the story. So for example, my wife likes to read a lot of books and she likes to start a lot of books, but she only reads the books for the bookmarks. She doesn't necessarily read the story because she generally wants to read the story. I read books because I generally care about the story, and I care about the characters, and I care about how the reading makes me feel. When I'm reading a book, I want to be transported somewhere where I don't have to worry about life, where I don't have to worry about work and bills and taking care of kids and being an adult. When I'm reading a book, I want to be transported somewhere where I can just sit back, relax, read the book, and get lost in the story. I'm very excited to get back into this. I've only read, let's see, what page am I on? I'm on page 12. I'm on page 12, and this book has, let's see if we skip through the appendix. This has 638 pages. This book is going to take me a while to read. But the thing is with Tad Williams is he writes so well that when you're reading and reading and reading and reading, you just get lost in it. You just get lost in it. I mean, yeah, it took me a little bit of time to get through The Witchwood Crown, but I was still lost in it. I loved it. I loved reading the story, and I love getting lost in the story. So what's next? What's next? Well, obviously I'm going to be working on the Empire of Grass, so I probably won't be, if I can get it finished by the end of this month, maybe I can talk about it, but I don't really want to talk about it because, I don't know if I look at my calendar here, because the thing is I'm going to be very busy towards the end of July, so I probably won't be able, I'm going to try to get it done. I mean, we still got at least 3-ish weeks of this month, so maybe I can finish in 3 weeks, but that's kind of a stretch. I know I read pretty fast, but I don't read that fast. Again, my life is very busy with taking care of my kids and working, so whenever I get a chance for downtime, I always take the opportunity to relax and read. So what's next for the next video? Well, I think what I would like to do is probably go back and talk about some of the other books that I read for this year, or maybe talk about some of the books that I read last year that I haven't made videos on yet. So I think that might be where it's gonna go for the next video, for the next end of the month video. I'm trying to make these as consistent as possible, but I know that it's very difficult for me to sit down and record, especially after dealing with the kids. Sometimes they don't really go to sleep right away, so I have to wait until they go to sleep and then I can start recording. And then once they start recording, I have to do other things. So we're gonna see what I can talk about for the next end of the month video. In the meantime, I'm still gonna be reading our friend Tad Williams. If you have not read anything by Tad Williams, whether it's The Last King of Ostenard or Otherland or Memory, Sorrow, Thorn, or Shadow March, or The Tail Chaser's Song, or whatever he's written, I highly, highly, highly recommend you read his stuff. You will get blown away, and you will not stop talking about this stuff. I think he's one of the most underrated authors that's out there. I don't think any of his stuff has been adapted into TV or to movies, at least not right now. I don't think it's going that way. I don't know if he's writing anything else. He did finish writing the Last King of Ostenard series, which is what I'm reading. He did write 2 other stories that kind of take place in between, so I might have to get those to read those. But again, he's a great author. He's a great writer. I really like his work, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this month just sitting down on my couch, popping in some music, and just reading this book and getting lost in the world, and really just soaking it all in. Reading The Witchwood Crown brought me back so many great memories of reading the Dragonbone Chair of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series. You don't necessarily have to read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn to read The Last King of Ostenard, but it kind of helps if you read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and then you read this one. It makes things a little bit easier. He even explicitly says you don't have to, but again, it makes things easier, and it just helps to flesh out the world and figure out really what you're reading. Wow, I think I made it. So, am I excited for Tad Williams to continue writing, and am I excited to continue reading him? Yes, I am. And that will be the end of our end of the month video. So if you liked this, I know it's a little long, if you like this, remember to hit the like, share, comment, subscribe, wherever you watch videos, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a great day.